So you have heard that people are saving hundreds of thousands of dollars on their taxes. And so in today's video, I'm going to walk you through my exact framework that I use with clients to help them get results, and not only get results today, but also help them build wealth in the future. So right now, I am sharing my screen and I'm going to walk you through a framework that I call Keep. And this is the exact framework that I use to service my clients, help them save hundreds of thousands of dollars on their taxes, and then also build generational wealth. So how today is going to work, I'm going to walk through the framework, and then I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like in real time with one of my clients' results. So what is the Keep framework? So it stands for it's four letters, which stands for 4 phases of how I work with clients. And each has a unique element in what we're trying to accomplish. So Keep stands for, the first is Kickoff. The second is Execute. The third is Evaluate. And the fourth is Plan and Protect. So K, our kick off our time together. And so normally when I work with a client, it's a year-long engagement and we are actively trying to hit milestones. But in order for us to understand what those milestones are, we have to have this kickoff phase. And so in the kickoff phase, before we even start working together, the first thing that I ask clients, and I want to make sure that they understand what has historically been their tax liability. There's a couple things that we have to consider. So first of all, if you are a W-2 employee only and you are not married, what we can do in terms of strategy is limited. It's not that it's not impossible. It's not that nothing exists, but it is limited. So we need to understand your filing status, how you earn income. All those things are encompassed in our kickoff. But before we even dive into the nitty-gritty of your personal financial situation, we also need to know what your tax liability is. And so if your tax liability is greater than 10 to 15K, we have opportunity. 10 to 15K, that's kind of the floor of where we can start working together and actually help you save money. But here's the thing, the higher your tax liability is, the more that we can accomplish, because we're not just trying to save money for today, but we are trying to actively plan for the future, taking that money and then reinvesting it in a way that benefits you in your family and your financial goals. So first thing is that we have to assess, do you meet the requirements? And so is your tax liability at least 10 to 15,000? If it is, then we can move forward and do something that I call the assessment. And so what is the assessment? So the assessment is think of it like when you go to the doctor. You can say, hey doc, I'm having neck pains, I'm having a little upset stomach, I have a headache. And what you would not want to happen is that you go to the doctor and they say, oh, you have a headache, you have neck pain, you have an upset stomach, here's a prescription for that. What you want them to do is actually assess. You want them to ask questions. You want them to dig a little deeper and ascertain the root cause of your circumstance. And so we are doing the same thing. We are evaluating your financial health. And so we are going to do an assessment. And this assessment is all encompassing. We're talking about retirement. We're talking about W-2 versus business income. We're talking about trusts and estate planning. Why is that important? Because as we go through this process of looking at all the nooks and crannies of your financial house, we are able to discern where there's cracks in the foundation, where the foundation may be strong, where we can add on a room, where we can start actually turning this financial house into a home. So what happens after the assessment? After we have gone through the assessment, we are then going to use that information to come up with a plan that we deem is going to bring the most value, not only for today, but also for your financial future. And so once we've determined that, we've done a deep dive diagnostic and looked at everything, we're now going to move into our execute stage. So in our execute stage, we are going to execute the plan. So what does that mean? We would have, during the assessment, identified 1 to 2 big ticket strategies. And when we say big ticket strategies, what we mean by that is this is going to be responsible for knocking out 80+% of the tax savings that we are able to get for you. Now, our goal is always to get to zero or as close to zero as possible. However, we are not going to sacrifice your future, what works for you and your family in order to get a zero tax bill. That just doesn't make sense. However, we always employ 1 to 2 big ticket or heavy hitter strategies. And once we use that to wipe out a nice portion of your tax bill, then we're going to layer on, we'll say 2 to 3 low-hanging fruit strategies. These are things that are easy to implement, that don't require a lot of work to get up and running. And once we have that plan, the next thing that we do is we move right into evaluate. So we have the plan, we've used the assessment to determine what was possible and what we think is the best fit for you and your financial future. Then we are going to execute that plan. We're going to do the things that we need to do in order to kick them off. And then after we've done that, and let me just put this in perspective, the execute phase takes about 90 days. And in that 90 days, you would have a clear plan of what your projected your income and tax liability is for the future. And then you also now have a plan in place on how we're going to address that. And so once we've gone through that 90-day sprint of the kickoff, doing the assessment, looking at what makes sense for you, coming up with the plan and activating the plan, we are now moving into the evaluate stage. And in the evaluate stage, what we're doing is this. We are saying, okay, we've found the strategies that work for you. We're doing equipment leasing. We're doing a cost segregation. We're doing GFX trading. Whatever the strategy is that we're implementing specifically for you, what we are now going to do is evaluate. And so that means that we are going to do quarterly projections. We're going to review logs. We're going to have consistent check-ins. We're going to adjust withholdings if necessary. That's what we are doing in the evaluation stage. If this is making sense so far and you say, you know what, I think I need a service just like this, I want to go through this process, I invite you to click the link in the bio and we can determine whether or not an assessment is the right choice for you. So once we have that in place and we see that the plan is working appropriately, we finally move into our plan and protect phase. And in the plan and protect phase, what are we doing? We're looking at the plan. We're looking at the cost savings that we were able to generate for you. By this time, we would be clear on what your tax refund is going to be or how much you are saving that you may have already earmarked for taxes. And now this is where we transition from tax savings to reinvesting. Everything that we talked about in the kickoff stage. And so this is a cyclical model, right? So everything that we talked about in the kickoff phase is now coming back to play in our plan and protect phase. So if during the kickoff and assessment, you said, I have 2 children. I have a life insurance policy, but I don't have any trust set up. I don't have an estate plan set up. Well, now is the time that we're going to start working on that. Or perhaps you're a single individual and you say, I started a business. I'm 35 years old, but I don't really have much in the way of retirement. That is what we are now going to start working on in our plan and protect stage, taking that tax savings and then using it to build your financial future. So I want to just transition really quick and talk through what I've been able to accomplish for one of my clients. Okay, so this is the results of a real plan. What we have determined is that we were able to save this client $285,000. Now, I want to be clear that these strategies that we implement, especially our big ticket, super focused, that are meant to knock out 80+% of the tax savings, they do require some investment to make them happen. So for this client, we included something called charitable gift financing. So let's say we needed about $80,000 to execute the strategy properly. What is remaining is $200,000. And so let's take that $200,000, let's invest it in the market for the next 40 years, because for charitable gift financing, the terms are about 40 years, the average return on the S&P 500 and mutual funds is about 11-12%. But we are going to do a very conservative 8% year over year. What does that turn into for our client? By taking that $200,000 in tax savings, we have now added $4.1 million in net worth just with one strategy. Now imagine that we take this approach of tax planning and we layer it on year after year after year. What happens to your net worth? And so if you are skeptical about tax planning, if you've seen a whole bunch of stuff on social media but not really understanding how that can actually be beneficial to you, I want you to understand that tax planning, that using the KEEP framework is the exact method and strategy that the top 1% are using to create generational wealth for them and their families. So if you found this video helpful, go ahead and watch this one. I think it will be really, really beneficial for you.